Okay, let's move back to the news. This Wisconsin judge who got arrested late last week by the FBI, completely justifiably, because it looks like she obstructed justice when ICE showed up at her courtroom to arrest a suspected illegal immigrant. And he was in the midst of a criminal proceeding because he'd been accused of battering somebody, two people, who were there in the courtroom ready to give testimonials. And this judge, upon seeing that ICE was there with intent to deport this man, who I think he already had a deportation order, shepherded him out, kicked out ICE, shepherded him out a back door, the door used by the jury, and then into the hallway along with his defense lawyers. And then he ran. One ICE guy was left at the front door unbeknownst to the judge. And I guess he saw them come out the other way and went over and was like, he started chasing him, like following him. And then he caught up with him and the guy ran. He took off. So then they did catch him and they went back and they arrested this judge for obstruction of justice. Listen to how Rachel Maddow described this issue.
We've had time to settle into what it's like to have Donald Trump in a position of power, right? So it's not like we didn't know it was going to be terrible. And it is terrible. He really did have a judge arrested today. And we will have more on that in a moment. He's not even 100 days in, and we are in desperation mode from him already. Arresting a judge today. Are you kidding me? That is a sign of weakness, not strength. It is the public that is being strong here, and he cannot handle it. If this feels like an insane and reckless escalation from the Trump administration arresting a judge, I will tell you, you are not alone. It sure felt like that to lots of people in Wisconsin today. People who showed up outside the federal courthouse in Milwaukee after the judge was arrested. More than 100 people out there today on no notice on a Friday in the middle of the day to spontaneously show up.
Dangerous and irresponsible escalation. It was an escalation. She literally makes it sound like this was just over a ruling Trump didn't like, that he sent in the FBI to go arrest him, as opposed to what actually happened was she obstructed justice, allegedly. I haven't seen any facts that would save her from that charge, not one put out by her side or anybody else, and is going to look at consequences for it, the same as anyone else who obstructed justice would, Emily.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually love to get Rachel Maddow, force her to answer the question of what, if this is so bad from Donald Trump, does she think the judge did anything wrong, right? So maybe she's just, if you hypothetically gave her the benefit of the doubt and said she's just mad that the FBI arrested a judge. Okay, so what, are you not mad about what the judge did? And I suspect Rachel Maddow would say no. And what's really interesting about that is what this judge did pushed the left's position on immigration to its logical conclusion. If you believe that deporting people is that bad, I mean, then of course you don't see this. There's nothing wrong with what this judge did, which is why this judge, who is very apparently reportedly plugged into this activist network in Milwaukee, was able to get so many people to rally on her behalf in the middle of a Friday, as Rachel Maddow said. And so I think this is actually, I've been sort of frustrated, even as a conservative, with some of the cases that this administration has chosen to elevate as high profile examples and the double and triple down on, because I haven't thought that they've been, very, very good examples of the policies that the administration is pursuing. You couldn't find a better example of a judge that needs to be arrested based on the facts that have emerged so far than this one. This is something that works with the public. They see someone abusing their office to protect someone who is abusing the privilege of being in the United States. I mean, this is a slam dunk for the Trump administration. And for Rachel Maddow to jump out ahead of the story, I think really says a lot about where the left is on immigration.
I mean, you might be able to find a better example. That judge down in New Mexico, who's now accused of actually harboring a Tren de Aragua gang member. Here's Pam Bondi on Fox News talking about that on Friday.
So Judge Cano, soon to be former Judge Cano, his charges were just unsealed. He's charged with obstruction. He admitted post Miranda. He took one of the TDA members' cell phones himself, took it, beat it with a hammer, destroyed it, and then walked the pieces to a city dumpster to dispose of it to protect him. The wife also is charged with destroying evidence. Sandra, not only that, this TDA member, and he had on a necklace that said kill, something about death. He had tattoos all over him. He also had on his cell phone pictures of two decapitated victims, decapitated, gruesome photos. And he was sending them out, and whoever he was sending them to was sending back saying, hey, you need to be careful. You shouldn't be sending these. You shouldn't be texting these photos out.
And yet, this New Mexico judge accused of harboring this guy, it's a problem. This is like, even judges can go too far, can obstruct justice, can violate the harboring laws. And what are we supposed to do? Just give them a pass because somebody gave them a judicial robe, Eliana?
I have to say I'm sort of befuddled by the position of the Trump critics on this one. Is it that judges can't obstruct justice or commit crimes, or that if they do, they should not be arrested? I don't really understand that. But the details of the Wisconsin case are one thing that I think has been totally overlooked, is that this guy who ICE agents showed up to arrest with a warrant. They agreed to wait outside the courtroom. They presented their papers and did everything by the law, was in court for a hearing on 3 counts of domestic abuse for beating up a man and a woman. His victims were in the courtroom for a pre-trial hearing. And what the judge did was deny them due process of law by letting this guy run out on the street through the back door. So this was a total miscarriage of justice that left 2 alleged victims that this guy had beat up and sent to the hospital, standing in the courtroom, not knowing what was happening. And the accused, the guy accused of beating them up, running off down the street to go free, which seems
that's exactly right.
Pretty bad. Seems pretty bad.
Yes, it says he was charged with 3 counts of misdemeanor battery, domestic violence, and infliction of physical harm. The charges stem from a March 12th fight that occurred between Flores Ruiz and 2 roommates after he was accused of playing music too loudly in the home. The complaint says he punched one roommate 30 times, then hit a woman who tried to end the fight. He pleaded not guilty to the charges, but they showed up and were sitting there and wanted to give testimony and couldn't because this judge scurried him out the back. I mean, she cut the proceedings short, that's the allegation, so that she could save him from ICE. He had been previously deported. And by the way, notwithstanding that, they say he was actually going to be provided still a notice of intent and decision to reinstate the prior order of deportation. So another layer of due process on this guy. He would have had the opportunity to contest the determination by making a written or oral statement to an immigration officer. But no, none of that is acceptable if you ask the left. Here's New York Times' David Brooks on this Judge Dugan, SOT 7.
Well, obviously they're trying to send a note of intimidation, not only to her, but to all judges and maybe to all Americans. But I don't yet know the specific details of this case, whether she escorted the guy out the jury door or whether she's let him. So that's all murky. I don't want to comment on this specific case. But especially on the issue of immigration, there are a lot of people who are appalled by what the administration is doing. And there will be times for civil disobedience. And to me, if she, let's say she did escort this guy out the door, if federal enforcement agencies come to your courtroom and you help a guy escape, that is 2 things. One, it strikes me as maybe something illegal, but it also strikes me as something heroic. And in times of trouble, then people are sometimes called to do civil disobedience. And in my view, when people do civil disobedience, they have to pay the price. That's part of the heroism of it, frankly.
She's a hero. She's a hero who just behaved civilly disobedient, Emily.
Well, you know what? It turns out the details actually are important in this case.
Yeah,
it turns out you might want to know before you say she's a hero.
Conservative David Brooks. Yeah. Yeah, conservative
right.
David Brooks, New York Times conservative writer David Brooks. It's just like, listen, this gets my blood boiling. It's not just even the alleged victims in this case that are being deprived of due process. It's the American people who are potentially having to harbor someone who was charged with this, because we're potentially going to have to live shoulder to shoulder with somebody who was charged with this because some activist judge appoints herself ahead of what the FBI wants in this case. And again, by the way, I thought Rachel Maddow was a defender of the FBI's authority. It's important law enforcement authority. When the FBI was going after Donald Trump, that's where the left came down on the sacred duty of the FBI. But now the American people not only have to deal with the flood of what the New York Times estimated to be, I think, a net of 8 million people who came into the country under the Biden administration. That is the population of multiple medium-sized states put together. So the American people don't even just have to deal with that. They have to also deal with the left saying that even the people, even the worst of the worst, people who are have all of these multiple orders, have had these insane allegations against them. We can't even deport those people. You just have to live with them, because we should have open borders and we should allow as many people as possible to claim asylum in the United States of America. And any effort to push back on that, we will have to push back on that. And so you just have to live with this. I mean, it is so, I don't know if the alleged victims in this case are US citizens. And if we said that they were, I mean, imagine that being you or your family. You get beat 30 times by somebody who's not supposed to be here. And then a judge just deprives you of the opportunity to have that case held out and to hold someone to justice. I mean, it's completely. What about the citizen apartment residents of that apartment building who have to put up with this guy blasting music all day, beating their neighbors, making them feel unsafe, allegedly? They can't even get a day in court because some dumb judge. And Rachel Maddow's upset that she gets arrested for doing something illegal.
Oh no, they think the left is the narrative on this is that this was intimidation. This was the Trump administration trying to intimidate all judges, as if they had wanted to do that, if that were their goal, as if they wouldn't have done something to Judge Boasberg. That's the one they can't stand. That's the one who's done all sorts of things to Team Trump, including finding them in criminal contempt before the U.S. Supreme Court. Well, after he found them after the U.S. Supreme Court said, you didn't have jurisdiction over this case, but he proceeded anyway. If there were a judge they really wanted to intimidate, it would have been Boasberg. They haven't. Trump has sent out mean tweets about him. Okay, literally everybody on earth has had a mean tweet from President Trump. This is a federal district court judge who has absolutely no business, right? She's federal district court, doing this kind of thing. She's state. Any other federal or state judge would have been arrested for doing this with a criminal defendant who was under the federal watch, who was about to be arrested by the feds. Here is the messaging, though. It's a montage from the Dems, SOT 10.
Why would you possibly do this? And the answer is because we want to send a signal to the judiciary.
In my perspective, this is about intimidation and intimidating any potential judges over the next several years that could stand in the way of whatever Donald Trump wants to do.
But regardless of the facts, this was put on to be a show. This is really to show intimidation of judges across the entire country, because we know that Republicans in Congress have not been standing up to these terrible policies. It's been our judiciary. It's been our justice system. And so now they're under attack.
Yeah. So that's where they're going to go with it. And my question for you is, this is what, I don't know, the fifth big individual case that's come up in the immigration lane, right, since Trump started the deportations. We had Mahmoud Khalil, the spokesperson for the Colombia bullies. Then we had Abrego Garcia. I missed one. There was another one in there. We have this judge now. There's been a handful of individual names that people are starting to know as the sort of the face of the Trump immigration or deportation struggle. And is it starting to work from the left? Because we have seen polls today that are not great for Trump. Trump's pushing back on them, citing his own internal pollster, who's very good, John McLaughlin, saying that they're weighted too heavily to Democrats and independents. They don't have enough Republican or Trump voters in there. I'm not sure about that. We actually looked at, we did a compare and contrast, and while there aren't that many Republicans in there, it seems to be the same amount of Republicans that most pollsters use. It's basically like 30, I'll tell you exactly what they are. For example, the New York Times poll, which is terrible for Trump, has a sampling of 30% GOP, Dem 28%, so it's 2 percentage points more Republicans, and 33% independents, which actually to me seems to be what hurt him, because he's not doing well with independents. You look back at a Harris poll, Harvard-Harris, which had Trump up 2 this month. All these other polls are finding him down. They had it GOP 35, Dem 33, so it had GOP up 2, same as New York Times. But they had the overall sampling had more Republicans and Democrats than it did independents. They had 28% independents versus 33% independents in the New York Times poll, which I think wound up hurting Trump. Like, independents have turned on him. That's what I think the headline of these latest polls is. They don't like all the stuff that like the base likes and or at least finds fine, is like not nonplussed by. The Dems who voted for Trump and the independents who voted for Trump, who are more like, not like the really right-leaning ones, but even the left-leaning independents are mad. He's starting to lose support with those groups. And it's in several polls. Hold on a second. Let me find my numbers so we can go through some of them. Okay. You've got Trump's overall approval rating. NBC, 45, disapprove 55. So he's 10 points underwater. CBS, 45, 55, same, 10 points under. ABC, Washington Post, which is one of the ones Trump called out, a 39% approval rating, a 55% disapproval. So that's 10 plus 6 is 16 percentage points underwater. And then you've got
Blonde
CNN.
math.
Exactly right. You got CNN, 41% approve, 59% disapprove. So that's obviously very bad. The trend line in the Real Clear Politics average of all polls, also not good. He last had a net approval on March 12th, where it was 48.3 to 48.1. And the averages are really what you should go with. And now it's down to negative 6.7 as of Sunday when you look at the Real Clear Politics average of all polls. When you look at, what's going wrong, why people are upset, that New York Times poll, he's starting to lose them in immigration, which has always been his strongest, but he's starting to lose support there. They're very unhappy about the economy in particular. And he's got really bad numbers when it comes to the economy and tariffs, which people are not in favor of. But the starting, like the waning in the immigration numbers, which have held solid up until arguably right now, would be a cause for concern. It doesn't surprise me at all, Eliana, because all you hear about Trump on these stories is the bad facts. You really do not get fair and balanced coverage. Like that Mahmoud Khalil, for one, they basically made him into an American citizen, which he was not. He had no right to stay here. And he was an agitator on that college campus, acting as the spokesperson for a group that was committing criminal acts on Columbia's campus, which you didn't read about. You talk, he was peaceful. He really wanted to negotiate a peaceful settlement. And all it would have taken was a complete divestiture by Columbia of any Jewish cause in order to do it, right? It's like, you forget that. And then Abrego Garcia, the Maryland man, it's a hoax. That's the new hoax. It's the new find people on both sides. He's just a Maryland man who's just wearing a Chicago Bulls hoodie. That's it, without putting into context, that he was with 2 gang members. That is the colors. Those are the colors for MS-13. They all wear those hoodies as part of like their uniform. This July, there is a global summit of BRICS nations in Rio de Janeiro. The bloc of emerging superpowers, including China, Russia, India, and Iran. They're meeting with the goal of displacing the US dollar as the global currency. They're calling this the Rio Reset. As BRICS nations push forward with their plans, global demand for US dollars will decrease, bringing down the value of the dollars in your savings potentially. While this transition won't happen overnight, the Rio Reset in July marks a pivotal moment when BRICS objectives move decisively from theoretical possibility toward inevitable reality, according to many experts. Learn if diversifying your savings into gold is right for you. Birch Gold Group can help you move your hard-earned savings into a tax-sheltered IRA in precious metals. Claim your free info kit on gold by texting MK to 989898. With an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers, let Birch Gold arm you with a free no-obligation info kit on owning gold before July and the Rio Reset. Text MK to 989898 today. Message and data rates apply. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.